Hello and welcome to the video version of Full Contact Nerd Interviews. I'm Cris Alvarez and thank you for watching. I'm speaking with Sarah Reed, author of The Bone Weaver's Orchard, published February 1st, 2019 by Trepidatio Publishing and also winner of the 2019 Bram Stoker Best First Novel Award. Thank you for speaking with me.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to meet you all.
Cool, thanks. So first, as a writer, you have a lot of ideas rolling around in your head. How did this particular idea rise above the rest and become the book you wrote?
Well, I did a thing that they tell you shouldn't do, which is I didn't really pick a single idea, because I didn't really think I was writing it for anyone but myself. Instead, I just put all my favorite things in, and all my favorite ideas. So everything I loved about historical fiction and Gothic fiction and different characters and things like that. I did it all. I didn't pick one. I just had a blast.
Oh, okay. Um, so tell me about the book then. Describe it to me.
Well, it takes place in 1926 in
Mhm.
Yorkshire at a boarding school that used to be an abbey, and then before that, it was a ancestral family home. And well, wait, reverse that. It was an abbey, and then an ancestral family home, and then it became a school.
Mhm.
And um, it's about a young boy named Charlie, and he comes to this school from Africa, where his father is part of the colonizing British army, going throughout the different countries. And so he is not familiar with British education and customs and has a hard time assimilating. He loves insects and has a collection that he brings with him, which is not popular amongst the students and staff of the
Mhm.
school. But he does manage to make one friend, who then vanishes. And it's his quest to prove that his friend didn't just run away and that there's something else going on at the school.
Mhm. Why did he have the hobby of the entomology? Is that the right word for
Yeah,
insects?
because I really like bugs.
Ah, okay. So
That's the simple answer.
okay. Do you study them that intensely or did this character?
No,
Okay.
no, I don't dig into it too deeply. I like to follow entomologists on Instagram, and I did some research for the book, but I I am not myself an entomologist. I have a lot of accidental pet spiders, but nothing formal.
Accidental? Like
Yeah.
the small variety or the larger variety?
No, just the house spiders that I don't get rid of them. I just let them
Mhm.
be, and they accumulate in great numbers sometimes.
Yeah, I think people forget how useful spiders are in taking care of other nastier bugs.
Oh yeah, yeah, they're our friends. That's what I have to tell my children who don't much like my habit of letting them be.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Poke around and so so you did mention you did a little research in entomology for the book. What other research did you do for the history and maybe the setting and all that?
Oh, lots. I researched old buildings in the area and what their history was like. I researched the family dynamics of those, ancient families, and the houses themselves and the Reformation and how they came to be houses instead of churches. And
Mm.
I did a lot of research about that. But then, I mean, you'll be writing and then you'll realize there's this one detail and you have to know the answer to move forward. Like, in one of the opening scenes, there's a car idling out front of the school, and I'm writing and I pause. And I'm like, wait, it's 1926. Can they idle? And that will send me off on a day's hunt for information about what kinds of cars you could get in 1926 in Yorkshire and could they idle. you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah,
so
that's
you
fun
know,
stuff.
there's a lot of research that goes into writing historical fiction, but that's also the part I enjoy the most, so it works out fine.
So did you come across any details, historical details that surprised you or shocked you?
Um, well, not particularly shocking because I have read this genre since my youth, and so a lot of it kind of fell. It was more a confirmation of the mental picture that I had more than surprising me.
Mhm.
Um, there was more technology than available than I would have normally thought in a remote house like that. But, because I debated for a while, it's like, well, do I put a telephone in the office? It's like, well, yeah, I think I kind of got to, it's far enough along that they really should have one. They
Yeah.
might not have been super common, but this was a rich family that had owned the house before, so they very likely would have had one. So
Mhm.
stuff like that, just weighing, the what to include and what not to include.
And so another part to that question is, did you come across any details that maybe changed your story? And you don't have to go into details, to give anything away, but
um,
it sounds like you knew the world pretty well already then.
yeah, it's like I said, it's the area that I've always loved to read. So I've read a lot of books that take place in throughout history in England and all these different time periods. And
Mhm.
so I kind of have benefited a lot, I think, from the hard work a lot of researchers have done before me. Just
Okay.
already had kind of a picture in my head of what what it would be like there, even
Mhm.
though I've never been there.
Mhm.
But
So, and why 1926 precisely or
I
specifically?
wanted to work with that kind of anti-colonialism theme.
Mhm.
Um, and I wanted to have enough modern thinking available there to for for Charlie to have these philosophies and so I didn't want it to be too far in the past because I wanted to show um some progression of thought in terms of like Sam Forster's character.
Mhm.
He's mixed race and he works at this school, and what is his situation like there. So I wanted to bring in some of those themes that, I mean, I could have done at other times in history too,
Mhm.
but it just seemed to fit better
Mhm.
in that specific period of time during the rebellions in Cairo. That would have been a situation in which an officer who had maybe brought his family with him would have to send them away.
Okay. And I haven't read the book, so I'm curious. So what sort of horror do you put in the book? And I don't want you to give anything away, but is it more like monsters or more gothic atmosphere, or what's your approach?
It's definitely more gothic atmosphere. And just as with many things I write, I try and dance that line between psychological and supernatural a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, so there's a few elements that are ambiguously supernatural, but are also perfectly explainable psychologically.
Okay. Okay. So tell me some of the things that generally inspire you, and that can be either in books, movies, TV, music, games, whatever.
Uh,
Yeah.
Everything. That's part of the problem, I think. Everything's so interesting. I want to know it all.
Oh,
But I mean, like I said, I do love Gothic fiction. So I read a lot of that and movies.
yeah. Hmm.
That's probably my favorite flavor. But I'm a librarian, so I read
Okay.
everything in addition to that. So it's hard for me to just pinpoint one source of inspiration because I might be inspired by a children's picture book
Mm.
to
Yeah.
write something that's far from, far removed from the children's literature world. So
Yeah.
it's, inspiration's everywhere. I think it's just a matter of, when you're paying attention.
Hmm. So, I mean, you have a lot of books behind you. How do you choose what you just flip through and what you end up buying and taking home and adopting?
Well, this picture is actually from a bookstore in New Orleans.
Okay.
It
Okay.
was, I would have lived there if I could have. It's not that far from what my house actually does look like, but if it's a virtual background, then nobody has to know that my house does look like this. So it's just a different wall that looks like that. But yeah, I love books, and I always have. I've always worked in either libraries or bookstores, and my house is, I think I have 9 big bookshelves full, and like double layered. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I have the same, so I totally understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, and yeah, I adopt a lot of books.
Yes. Yes.
I'm speaking with Sarah Reed, author of The Bone Weaver's Orchard. You can find more information about her work at inkwellmonster.wordpress.com. If you like this episode of Full Contact Nerd interviews so far, please subscribe and hit the like button. If you want daily book suggestions for new fiction and nonfiction studies in sci-fi, fantasy, horror, mysteries, gaming, game design, film history, and more, please check out my YouTube channel, Cris Alvarez Full Contact Nerd, my podcast, Full Contact Nerd Interviews, and my webpage, chrisalvarez.com or fullcontactnerd.com. If you're looking for military history and general history, including true crime, please check out my YouTube channel, War Scholar, my podcast, Military History Inside Out, and my webpage, warscholar.org or militaryhistorypodcast.com. If you're looking for space history and the science, technology, and business of space, check out my YouTube channel, Spacewalks Money Talks, my podcast, Technology in Space, and my website, technologyandspace.com. Now back to the video. So what with this particular book, what would you say is if it had a soundtrack, or what's the aesthetic or the sort of the sound feeling of the book?
Well, I don't know. Maybe some spooky violins.
Mm-hmm.
The aesthetic is often compared to, and was somewhat inspired by, Guillermo del Toro's films.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of that, slightly gritty, historical, shadowed look to it. And as far as sound, though, that's tricky because I think it would be, dark 1920s music. I don't know.
Okay. So as far as your approach to writing, do you do anything out of the ordinary to write your drafts, or do you create, finish your novel?
I handwrite everything,
Hmm.
which I'm told is not ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
I think better on paper, and I've got 2 kids. I work 2 jobs,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm in grad school, so
Oh,
I don't have much time.
right.
So I have to write when I can and where I can. And technology, while it can do that, it's not seamless. So for me, a pen and paper is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And they go with me everywhere, room to room, place to place.
Mm-hmm.
And so I handwrite all my drafts, and then I go back and read through and make notes, and then I type it up. And by the time I type it, it's really a third draft.
Mm-hmm.
So the revision process for me is, I don't know, I keep a separate notebook from the actual draft notebook. And in that separate notebook is where I make my revision notes and do my research and take research notes and draw blueprints and family trees, and all that kind of background detail work. notes all over it to remind myself of characters' names that I keep forgetting, things like that. And then, at that point, I'll exchange with other writers or editors and work on the manuscript then more with friends and partners, and then fix it up and then repeat that last step however many times.
Well, considering that you like writing, when you get to the point where you're using the computer to finish it up, is that not as much fun or frustrating for you?
It is. I don't like sitting at a screen anymore by the time my day is done.
Yeah.
Oftentimes if I get to a point where I know I'm going to be doing some big rewrites or big edits, I will print out the computer manuscript and do my edits on hard copy, because I got to take it with me or it won't get done.
Right. Okay. You have a workaround for the electronic systems.
Yeah. I mean, I'm good with computers, but we don't like each other. We just have come to a kind of truce.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, all of my projects right now are at the computer phase, and I'm kind of like, it makes me want to start another book so that I can get back to pen and paper.
I had this image in my brain of you and all your spiders staring angrily at the computer screen, and it's staring back.
That is almost exactly what it looks like. Yeah, because I have big windows. This room is almost all windows. It's more of a porch than an office. And because I'm always in here working late at night with the light on, the spiders have learned to build their webs across the windows because it attracts all the moths and little lake flies and things. So my windows are just covered in spiders 3 seasons out of the year. So yeah, that is precisely what it looks like when I'm working.
You're their ruler or their their provider, or you're
One of
part of
my
their
nicknames is Spider Mother.
you're part of that little biosphere.
Yeah,
That's pretty
I've
nice.
entered the ecosystem.
So considering, you won the award for this book, has winning the award changed your approach to writing at all?
Maybe. There is a little bit of that kind of, well, that seems to have set expectations a little high. Like, no pressure or anything now, but next one better be good too. But it helped that I had already written the next book before the award. So, but I am working on a prequel and a sequel for Bone Weaver. And I guess there's a little bit of pressure there because of the nature of the historical setting I chose. The prequel and the sequel are both very different because the prequel is going to be in Victorian times and the sequel takes place during World War II. And because change was happening so quickly in history, then they're very different worlds. So there's a very different feel for these other ones. So, I guess it's one of those things where it's like, well, I hope people will still like it, even though it's nothing like the original.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I think if they like your style of writing, then that should suffice, right?
Let's hope so. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. And I assume they'll both have sort of the similar horror Gothic feel to, well, you said they'd be slightly different, but they'd still have the same rules to their universes, right?
A bit, yeah. The prequel is, well, as far as like comparison inspirations go, Bone Weaver's Orchard is like the Secret Garden to me. That was its main inspiration. Gothic, but hopeful in a way. That makes sense. Whereas the prequel's very turning of the screw, very Gothic, a little darker. Um, it's about more about the history of the family that owned the home and why it became a school, like what happened to this family.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit more Gothic, which
Okay.
yay. Um,
Yeah.
Whereas the sequel taking place during World War II, obviously a little bit more modern, but
Mhm.
it also is but that one continues Charlie's story, the main character. Charlie's not in the prequel, he's not born yet.
Okay.
Um, and the sequel it's still horror, but it's weirder. It's more weird horror than Gothic horror.
Mm.
There's still definitely some Gothicism in there because I'm not sure how to not do that,
Mhm.
um, but it's not the same flavor of horror, I think, as Bone Weaver. So
I get the impression that sort of horror changes around World War II because of science. You have atomic stuff and you have more scientific
mhm.
creatures, and
Yes.
so when you say weird, it's more weird. That's what my brain starts thinking about that.
And that's how it goes, yeah, because Charlie does become an entomologist
Mhm.
and he does work in the war in that capacity.
Yeah.
And so I did dig into the science a bit, and um, yeah, I don't want to give too much away because I'm still writing that one, but
Right, right. Yeah.
plus I'll probably say something and change my mind later.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so which one do you anticipate will come out first, the prequel and then the sequel?
Probably I'm further along. I'm trying to write both at the same time, which is maybe a little bit silly, but
Hmm.
I'm also not actively working on either one of them right at this moment because I'm working on edits on an unrelated novel,
Hmm.
um, for an agent who I'm working with but not for at the moment.
Mhm.
Um, and then I'm also ghostwriting a novel for someone right now. So,
Oh,
but I'm a little bit further along in the prequel than I am the sequel. And I
mhm.
also want to do a lot more research for the sequel. So I think the prequel will definitely be first.
Mhm. Now, I think I noted in your bio you're also fiction editor for, is it Pat which magazine?
Oh, Pantheon magazine.
Hmm.
Yeah, which unfortunately it went on hiatus
Hmm.
2 years ago in
Oh.
hopes that we would come back at the beginning about a year ago at
Hmm.
2021. We were going to take a year off. But 2020 was like, now's maybe not a good time
Yeah.
to, to start that again. So I don't know when it will bounce back. Now
Mhm.
it's still sleeping. So
Okay.
if but if Pantheon magazine does stay on hiatus indefinitely, um, I may do some independent editing anthologies,
Mhm.
and just pitch them to other publishers I know. But probably not anytime too terribly soon, mostly because of grad school.
Yeah. So so you're editing, do you focus on horror fiction, or do you like working on all genres or other genres?
um, for Pantheon, we had a mixture of genres. It was just mythology themed, but it could be realistic, it could be horror, it could be fantasy, science fiction. We had all different kinds of writing. Um, we had an annual anthology called Gaia,
Mhm.
that went to 3 volumes. We did that for 3 years. That was all fantasy stories. Um, and that always benefited some nature cause. We would pick a nature conservatory or something like that for the proceeds. And then we had an annual horror one also called Typhon.
Mhm.
So we did lots of different genres.
Mhm. Okay. Um, so so normally I ask, and you've sort of answered much of this already. I ask, what other non-writing work have you done that's influenced how or what you write? And you mentioned, librarian. Um,
Yeah.
so you get a lot of ideas there. Anything else? Any other work?
Um, I mean, I used to, when I studied literature, I also would teach some literature courses,
Mhm.
but that probably still falls under that same umbrella as
Yeah.
librarian. It's like, used to, teach Shakespeare courses and Chaucer and medieval history and linguistics and
Mhm.
things like that. Word nerd, just lifelong word nerd.
Yeah. Do you remember what your first the first things you were reading when you were young? Do you remember what your introduction to literature was?
Well, my grandmother was just an avid reader, the most avid reader I've ever known, and I've known some wild readers. Um, and she always read to me, and she taught me to read when I was 3,
Mhm.
and she liked Gothic books too. So that's probably, this is all her fault. Um, and I remember one of my favorite picture books she used to read with me was called The Glow in the Dark Spooky House.
Mhm.
And so it was a ghost story picture book
Mhm.
that glowed in the dark, and you could read it in the light, and it was just this nice picture book about this family and their house. But if you read it in the dark, it was like a different story going on
Mhm.
invisibly on the same page. I
Yeah.
loved it.
Yeah. That sounds
So
pretty cool. Yeah.
that's one of my favorite earlier reading memories. Was I read that book so many times I wore out the glow in the dark on it.
Did you? I didn't know glow in the dark could wear out.
It will eventually rub off. Yes.
That's funny. Um, so how about editing and writing? When did you start dabbling in that?
Um, well, I was in 6th grade when I first started submitting poetry to journals,
Mm.
at the encouragement of my teacher, who we had a creative writing poetry unit that we just did in class. And, um, you know, we all had to, well, we didn't have to, but, a couple people got picked to read their poem to the class. And he really liked my poem, and my classmates liked my poem. And I was like, oh, what is this feeling? I could do this forever.
Yeah.
And he used to let me stay in at recess and write poetry, and he helped me find like children's magazines to submit it to, and I'm pretty sure he even paid for my submission fees or postal fees, because that was before the internet.
Yeah.
So you gotta lick a stamp to submit your work back then.
Yeah.
um and yeah, and he would receive my rejection letters for me and kind of hand them to me, you
Uh,
know. So that was really the start of it. And I kept and I started writing ghost stories in his class. He did not like those as much as the poems. He was always kind of like, okay.
they're a little too creepy, huh? So
Yeah, it's like, all right, I guess if that's what you want to write, huh?
so what were your poems about?
Usually nature, you know, trees and birds and things,
Oh,
but
okay.
sometimes spooky ones too. But yeah, I got real obsessed with like Emerson and Thoreau. Went through a big uh big poetry phase with that in junior high and high school. But
Did you
and
try to
Poe.
copy and Poe? Did you try to copy their style or more their subject matter?
I played with both. I love copying authors' voices. I think that's where I did a lot of learning to find my own voice as a
Mhm.
writer, was in copying other tones. And one of my favorite assignments ever was in 8th grade English. We had to rewrite The Raven.
Mhm.
And we only had to do like 3 verses, but I did the whole thing
Yeah.
because I could not stop. Um, and just finding that um, Poe's voice and writing a completely different poem. Mine was about witchcraft, a witch that has overstepped her own boundaries, and now it's coming back on her.
Yeah.
Um, and it was a spooky poem, and I had a lot of fun with it. So yeah, I like copying others' tone, which maybe is why I like to do ghostwriting now, is because I can be a different author for a little while.
Interesting. So does ghostwriting, does it involve understanding because I guess ghostwriting, do you write it all yourself or partly, or how does that work?
I think it depends on the gig. Um, Most of my ghostwriting assignments have been for people who aren't authors,
Hmm.
but who have a book they want to write
Hmm.
and have maybe tried to write it, aren't getting the results they want, already have other careers that make them, they don't want to develop an authorship. They just want to get this book out into the world. Um, or they're, in another industry or something. And so they will meet for a while, and I'll read their notes and their outlines, and we'll talk, and I will put on their voice and write their book for them. So it's fun.
Is it usually nonfiction subjects?
No, so far all the books I've written have been fiction, but for smaller pieces, I'll ghostwrite some nonfiction, but oftentimes those are like newsletters or blog posts for corporations. Like for a while, I wrote the weekly newsletter from a CEO of a tech company that he sent out to his employees. It was supposed to be from him, but he didn't have the time or energy to write these newsletters. So I wrote his weekly newsletter.
Yeah.
I had to pretend like I knew a lot about this specific branch of technology that I didn't. It was like AI stuff. It was like, I don't even like to type, sir, but I will write this for you.
So would he, I would imagine he would edit it, or did he just give you free reign to just send it out?
Oh no, I turn it into them, and once I turn it in, my contract's fulfilled. I don't care what they do with it.
Okay. Okay.
So, my name's not on it.
Right,
So
right.
if they want to ruin it, they can, but it's still their name on it.
Yeah, yeah. That's pretty cool. That keeps you busy and paid, I guess.
It pays better than writing your own fiction, that's for sure.
Oh, really? I imagine so. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
At least it's your vision. Even if you don't get paid as much, your vision is out there for
Exactly. It's more fun to write my stuff, but yeah.
I'm speaking with Sarah Reed, author of The Bone Weaver's Orchard. You can find more information about her work at inkwellmonster.wordpress.com. If you like this episode of Full Contact Nerd interviews so far, please subscribe and hit the like button. If you want daily book suggestions for new fiction and nonfiction studies in sci-fi, fantasy, horror, mysteries, gaming, game design, film history, and more, please check out my YouTube channel, Cris Alvarez Full Contact Nerd, my podcast, Full Contact Nerd Interviews, and my webpage, chrisalvarez.com or fullcontactnerd.com. If you're looking for military history and general history, including true crime, please check out my YouTube channel, War Scholar, my podcast, Military History Inside Out, and my webpage, warscholar.org or militaryhistorypodcast.com. If you're looking for space history and the science, technology, and business of space, check out my YouTube channel, Spacewalks Money Talks, my podcast, Technology in Space, and my website, technologyandspace.com. Now back to the video. So do you, considering your method, do you overwrite and then edit back near the end, or do you underwrite and then add later?
I underwrite a lot. So the one way that I've kind of described it in the past is I write like I'm doing a painting, where the first bit is just the background. It's just a wash. And then I'll add the details in different layers until I've built up the right depth. So I almost never cut anything unless I've decided to change the direction of the story. So for me, just about every edit is adding something. And I'll do it in waves. So like on Bone Weaver, one of the last waves I did was in determining that two of the students needed to have a better relationship or a more complex relationship with each other, because one of them didn't have enough scenes in the book. So that whole pass was just adding more scenes that gave those two characters opportunities to interact. But of course, the danger in editing that way is that I'll add all these scenes and then realize it's completely impossible for that to be that time of day later in the book. And then I have to like edit something to make that the next day or change the time of day, or why is the sun still out? It's the middle of the night now.
It's a
northern. You can have it's a domino effect when you start to make changes that way. So that's why there's a whole separate notebook for keeping track of things that otherwise could get messed up. Continuity is tricky.
Okay, so your other notebook's a continuity notebook then?
Basically, yeah. It's it's just a way for me to keep my thoughts organized so that when I need to go in and change something, I can look and make sure that I'm not going to completely screw something else up.
Do you use Post-it notes on your papers? Like flags or anything?
Sometimes. Yeah, I mean, if but mostly only if I know I need to go back later and change something. So if I'm doing a read through and say I'm working on that pass where I'm changing these students' relationships, and then it occurs to me that, oh, I need to change something else about this other character. I don't want to mix myself up, so I won't like go do that right then. I'll flag it and say, come back and do this when you're doing a pass that relates more to that subject. Because for me, I need to focus on one thing at a time, or I will just jump around. Like, oh, I'm working on this. Oh, but I got to go fix this. And then, but I'll forget to come back. So I have to limit myself.
So when you mentioned adding depth, the thing that pops in my mind is maybe balancing, and this might not be what you mean by depth, but what I think of is maybe balancing narration and dialogue and characterization and describing your world, like balancing those elements. Is that what you mean by depth, or is it something else?
Yeah, there's a lot of that. But some of it will be as simple as, one of my readers mentioned they're having trouble picturing what the dormitory looks like. So I may do a pass that is entirely descriptive of the building, because I don't want to add it all in one place, just like take someone through every minute detail of the building in one 300-page glomp of information. I mean, I could, that would be fun for me, but not for anybody else.
Right.
I like to read James the Missioner, so taking a 300-page break for description, I'm cool with. But it's not the way things are done these days. So I'll go through the whole manuscript and add, something as simple as a quick description of wood grain on a handrail. And while that's not like a big standout detail, and it might only be 5 words, it can do a lot to help complete the picture in someone's mind of what a room might look like, as if there's a, fine-grained wooden handrail, then they'll probably picture a room that they've seen sometime that had one and also had all this other detail, and let their imaginations do the rest. But, adding 5 words on this page, 10 words on this page, and just doing one full read through where I'm just adding like those little brush strokes.
And how about your use of language? Do you how do you approach that, the sort of the lyrical quality of your writing? Is it just kind of natural, or how do you approach it?
I'm not really sure. I mean, I don't have a strategy. I just do what I like the sound of. I play with words a lot, which some readers don't like. I've gotten some flack for that.
Hmm.
I like to use unexpected words, I think, in descriptions that create metaphors. I love metaphor and simile, and I will throw all of that in, which fortunately was well received. I was not expecting it to be, because lately the trend is very stark, sparse, efficient writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I like efficient writing, and I still try to keep things efficient.
Mm-hmm.
But I also love description and unapologetically will provide plenty of it. So I guess it's a matter of just trying to find that balance, but still getting to play with words. Because if I'm not playing with the words, then I'm not having very much fun.
Yeah. When you mentioned sort of, the trend is to start writing, I would ask about, like, doesn't G.R.R. Martin, like, isn't he like descriptive to the point where some people complain that it's too much? Is that just he's allowed to get away with that, or maybe the editing isn't as tight as it should be?
Yeah. Part of it's his genre, though. The epic fantasy has always had leeway for descriptive writing, which is one of the things I like about reading it.
Mm-hmm.
It is descriptive because it's entirely world building.
Mm-hmm.
And it's immersive. It's that whole genre. People seek it out because they want that immersion. So I think that's why he gets away with it, and that's why other books in that genre are also 800-page doorstops. In fact, in publishing, even you'll see a lot of places say they won't take books over 100,000 words unless it's fantasy. Because they know that that's just one of the expectations of the genre, is that you get a little more room to build that world.
Are there any current authors, fantasy authors, who take the opposite approach, where they have fantasy that has, the lean, stark writing, and they still have success with it?
Oh yeah, definitely. And even in science fiction too, which is the same kind of world building permissions.
Hmm.
Honestly, the best example I can think of efficient, effective world building writing is Nnedi Okorafor,
Hmm.
especially in the Binti trilogy.
Okay.
They're all novellas. They're not even full-length novels,
Mm-hmm.
but the world building and the descriptions are so engaging and so complete because there is this complete efficiency of language in her writing,
Mm-hmm.
where you can get the entire picture in just this brief, just deft wave of the hand.
Hmm.
It's magical.
Yeah. Would you say that's more than, is that her voice versus just a leaner way of writing? Does that make
um
sense?
I think it's leaner writing. I mean, she has longer books as well.
Mm-hmm.
um but as far as I mean, Gemma Amor is a horror writer right now. She was also nominated for the Bram Stoker.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and her books, a lot of them lean towards that novella length, but are just as descriptive and complete stories, but they're very efficiently worded.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Bone Weaver's not long. It's under 200 pages. It's very short, but horror, though, does tend to work better, I think, in general, at slightly shorter lengths,
Hmm. Okay.
because it's an adrenaline process, right? And that's a cycle. You can't maintain tension for too long without it starting to lose its effect a little bit.
Interesting. Um, so a bit of a whimsical question. Um, so when you were younger, was there any power technology or fictional setting that you yearn to have or be a part of?
Um, like tech power sci-fi or magic or like
Any of it,
anything?
anything. Like, what
Oh,
was the
oh,
world
oh.
or thing you wanted?
Well, I really, really wanted ghosts. Um, and I looked for them everywhere.
Hmm.
So I don't know if that counts though, but that was, if I had to pick one fantastical thing that and fairies, I was often just like could be real and reading about them, looking for them
Hmm.
and that sort of thing. Yeah, my friends and I would tromp around the woods looking for fairies, but not the like cute Victorian flower fairies either. We were into like the fae. Like we were looking for toadstool circles that would ruin our lives.
Looking for danger, I see.
Yeah. We
So
felt ready for it.
you were ready. You were prepared. What sort of what tools do you take with you to be ready to deal with that?
Well, we would prepare for these walks. Important to have a very spooky, fancy looking walking stick.
Uh-huh.
If you are able, bring a cat.
Hmm.
Uh, we we found a stray cat on one of these walks and somehow forced it to continue the walk with us. Um, your journal, we
Yeah,
used
yeah.
to we used to load up packs and we called them magical journeys, and there were rules like if you came to a rock, you had to turn left. If you came to a pile of snow, you had to turn right. If you came to a feather, you had to take 20 long paces forward. And it did not matter what obstacle was in your way, you had to follow the rules. And sometimes we ended up walking into lakes. Um, so it was, grand adventures before the internet, kids.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
do you do on the weekends?
And your parents
Walk
were
into a lake.
and your parents were totally behind these journeys.
They did not know where we were. This
Yeah,
was the 90s. They did not care. Come back at sunset.
yeah, yeah. They didn't know. They're like they're chasing fairies again.
We came back from one of those walks and we had walked into a lake. It had like a little promontory out into an island, but it was underwater at the time and it was winter
Mhm.
and we were very cold. We came back to her mom's house and like she filled up the bathtub and we had to put our feet in the bathtub to
Mhm.
warm them back up because we had to take our shoes off to walk in the water. And that was how I learned what it feels like when you take frozen feet and warm them up too quickly.
Oh, yeah.
It's very painful.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So did
But,
you ever come close to finding a fairy?
well, I have to believe we did. I'm not entirely certain we didn't walk through that toadstool ring. And I gotta say, the last like 13 months have pretty much convinced me we did.
Yeah. Um, so did you grow, so it sounds like you grew up in a country setting, or was it more suburbs and you found your way?
No, it was it was wilderness. Yeah. Uh Both mine and my best friend's house. Well, when my parents when they built their house, it was the only house around. Eventually it became a neighborhood.
Hmm.
But my best friend actually lived on a farm about 20 miles away, and we spent most of our time at her house. So
Hmm.
um yeah, it was all fields. It was in Colorado, right in the foothills. So some of our journeys were uphill. um yeah,
Makes me wonder.
beautiful.
Oh, I'm sure it was. Yeah. It makes me wonder if that stray cat was sent to keep an eye on you, the bunch of you, so that you didn't get into the wrong toadstool ring.
It, I I could believe that yes, might have been a might have been some much needed help, a governess of sorts.
Yes, exactly, exactly. In the
Yeah.
form of stray cat.
Yeah, we could have used some oversight. I remember one time we were deciding that we wanted to meditate in a thunderstorm, which
Hey,
is,
that's
if you've ever been in a thunderstorm in the Rockies, not a good idea. Um, yeah, that's the closest I've ever come to being struck by lightning. It
oh,
was real close. It's like we could see these like glowy lines like creeping up from the ground
hmm
in the field by us, and then our hair started to kind of and then we ran inside, and then it got real loud.
yeah. Huh. It's pretty cool. As long as you survive, that sounds like a pretty cool experience.
I don't know how, but we did.
It was stray
Think
cat was
as
watching,
far as
like, oh, those kids.
I think the cat had retired by that point.
Oh, really? Oh.
I give up. Seeking new assignment.
With this book, did you have any difficulties finishing it or getting it published?
No. Surprisingly, I expected more trouble than I got.
Hmm.
I wrote it for NaNoWriMo,
Mhm,
so I wrote it very quickly.
mhm,
Um, and for that one, I didn't really know where it was going. Um, I've since become more of an outliner, but
hmm.
for that one, I had never written a novel length piece before. I'd written a lot of short fiction, but every time I tried to write a novel, it would just end. So I was like, well, that's another short story. But this time I managed to keep it going.
Mhm,
And I edited it for years,
hmm.
about 4 years.
Okay.
So I'm not sure NaNoWriMo saved me time. I wrote it very fast, but then it took a long time to fix. So, um, but then I did submit to agents, and I got a revise and resubmit from the fourth agent I sent it to.
Hmm.
And so I spent some time doing that. And in the end, he passed, but wanted to see my next book. I was like, okay, well, I don't know when that's going to be, but sure. And he told me to set this one aside and
Hmm.
send him my next one. I was like, well, you didn't say yes, so I don't have to do what you say. Um, so instead, I thought, well, I'm kind of in a weird spot where I still really wanted this particular person as my agent. I knew it by then, I was already starting to write the next book. Um, so that I'd be sending that. So I thought, well, maybe I publish this one myself, and then I'll try the agent again with the next book.
Hmm.
So I researched smaller presses that you don't need an agent to submit to. And my top choice was Journal Stone, and largely because the editor working there, Jess Landry, was someone I wanted to work with. I knew of her. They had published several of my favorite authors like Gemma Files and Bracken McLeod. And so I was like, well, hey, I'm going to send it there. And they said yes. So I only submitted it one place, and so I didn't have trouble. Um, but yeah, I'm still kind of in that limbo. Um, and that agent, I did send him this next book, and we're working on that one. It still hasn't said yes, but we are working on it together. And this is now, gosh, 6 years in the process. So publishing is a slow business between writing, editing, revising, and producing and releasing books. It's not a quick industry.
No, no. But I guess having the Bram Stoker Award helps in some degree.
I
To
I
some.
hope it will. Yeah, I mean, if I do decide to, that I don't want to keep revising with this agent who has not signed me, I could go to a small press again and say, let's do this again, and or find another publisher myself, or go back to querying agents, and
Hmm.
yeah, having an award in your bio is great. In the end, though, it's really just the work that matters. So
Yeah. Um, okay. So where can people find you online? Do you have a website, social media?
I do. I'm on Twitter and Instagram as @inkwellmonster, just one word. And then my website is inkwellmonster.wordpress.com. And I haven't updated it in like a year because 2020
Yeah.
grad school.
Yeah.
But I do need to do that soon.
And I guess that's a standard spelling of inkwell and monster.
Yes, it is. Yep. I like fountain pens and ink wells, and that's what I write with. And I like monsters, so it seemed like my name.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask what you write with, and so fountain pens is what you stick to?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, I'm not super picky, but I like pens in general. But my favorite thing to write with are fountain pens. Yes, I have a small, well, moderate collection.
Cool. Yeah, actually, your bio said your hands are often covered with ink, so I guess that's where that comes from.
Yes, they usually are. I review fountain pens and inks for the Pen Addict blog also. So even if I'm not covered in ink for my own writing purposes, I'm usually covered in ink for that.
Yeah. Well, what's the best way to wash off ink? I know it's always been a problem when I get ink on my hands.
Most fountain pen inks are just water soluble, so soap and water just takes it right off. If it's like the thicker calligraphy inks, you might need like a pine soap or something fancy. Okay. But for fountain pen ink, though, it washes out of clothes, thank goodness, and carpets. Not so much wood floors, but skin, it comes right off.
Okay. I feel like I had trouble. Maybe I used like the very heavy, thicker ink because I recall having trouble. But okay.
Yeah, if you use like an iron gall ink or an India ink that has pigment and permanent factors, then yeah, you might have some staining for a couple of days. But most pen inks these days are just water-based, which means don't spill your tea on your notebook.
Yeah. So when you write it with these pens on the paper, do you have to worry about smearing? That's another thing, accidentally rubbing.
I use blotting paper.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the notebooks I buy are actually paper formulated for fountain pens, and they usually come with, or I can buy separately, sheets of blotting paper, and I just have a sheet that's the same size as my page. So anytime I have to close a page, I just keep that sheet in between, and it dries the ink on the page. So not a problem.
But as far as when you're writing, do you have to be careful about, where you position your hand so you're not smearing your.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I'm right-handed, so it's a little easier for me. My hand stays below my writing. I have left-handed friends who struggle a little bit more since their hand tends to follow the pen. But they make some inks that dry a little faster. These days you can get, faster drying inks or non-smearing inks and things like that. So
What fountain pen would you love to have that you don't own? What brand or style?
It's a long list. There's one that, like, everybody in the pen community, we say we have our grail pen, like the holy grail. It's unattainable. Like, we realize we'll never own this pen, but it's the one we want the most. And mine is it's a Nakaya, which is a handmade lacquered Japanese pen. And the lacquer on this particular model has been purposefully carved away to look like it's split. So it has like a little crack running down the length of the pen that's been lacquered black on the inside. and then 2 glowing eyes have been painted in the crack, and there's a claw creeping out of the crack, like around the pen.
Oh, wow.
I want the pen so much. It is $2,500.
Yeah.
I won't ever own this, but it is the most pen masterpiece I've ever seen.
Wow.
But I mean, I've held pens that cost as much as my house. Like, so, I mean, it's my grail pen, but somebody else's grail pen is like, 3 cars or so, like
Wow.
the pens run the full range and cost from pennies to like more than I will ever see in my life.
Wow. Wow. So if someone were to write out some kind of like a version of the Necronomicon or some kind of, spooky book that had real power, what fountain pen would they use for that? Do you think would be the
Well, I
best?
think they would have to carve it themselves, right? Maybe out of the bones of their enemy.
Ah.
If you're gonna work that kind of dark magic, you got to have the right tools.
Okay. Okay. So there's nothing on the market someone could just, shortcut.
You're not gonna go to Staples and find that pen. No, you're gonna you're gonna need to make it yourself. Maybe even out of one of your own bones. Like we're talking serious.
Yes, you could. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. I'll settle for that answer. That's fine. So, okay, cool. Well, that's all the questions I have now that we've veered off to pens, from books.
Yeah.
Do you have any final thoughts or words?
No, just thanks for having me. It was nice meeting you, and yeah, it was good. Nice chat. Thanks
Thank you.
for chatting with me.
Thank you. Thank you for watching this video version of Full Contact Nerd Interviews. If you like this episode, please subscribe for more. If you want daily book suggestions for new fiction and nonfiction studies in sci-fi, fantasy, horror, mysteries, gaming, game design, film history, and more, please check out my YouTube channel, Cris Alvarez, my website, chrisalvarez.com or fullcontactnerd.com, and my Twitch channel, Full Contact Nerd. If you're looking for new military and general history books and information, check out warscholar.org, my YouTube channel, Warscholar1945, and my podcast, Military History Inside Out. If you want new technology, science, and space books, check out technologyandspace.com and my podcast, Technology and Space. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to keep imagining the past, the present, and the future.